And we're back. So, the first question in that I was going to ask you is just like the show that you very generously gave your time to watch kind of explores what we've been talking about, the idea that all these different people within the show have experienced loss of some kind, but for whatever reason, it's inextricably linked in a way with the economics of modern life. And so, and how it doesn't feel like there's space for that, for us to deal with it. I was just curious if in your work, do you feel like you experience that on an individual basis with your clients, that conflict between loss and gain? And if so, how does it show up? Like, have you ever worked with a client? Yeah, like funeral costs is something you've talked about, or things like that.
Uh, yeah, I haven't gotten into funeral costs. I feel like a lot of my work has been more focused on the education. I think especially around grief, because again, um, living in our death phobic, grief phobic society, there's so much of, oh my God, why am I feeling like this? Why am I still dealing with this? And it's like, it hasn't been any time.
Mm,
Um, Here in Ontario, bereavement leave is 2 days. 2 days.
mhm,
And I can tell you 2 days after my dad died, I don't know what I was doing. I have
yeah.
no idea.
Mm,
And there are so many um limits and restrictions based on what was the relationship of the person to you.
yeah.
Um and I also believe it's you are limited to 2 days bereavement leave per year. So if you have more than one loss in a year, sorry,
Yeah.
which, in 2019, both my grandmothers died 6 months apart.
Mm.
So what do you, I mean,
Had
you
to
know,
pick one.
yeah, well, I mean, I've been self-employed a lot, so it's on the one hand, okay, you might go through some tough times financially, but also it's like, hey, if I need to take time, I'm taking time because, and also again, how well can you work when you're
Yeah,
grieving?
absolutely.
Um, and again, I think just going back to that idea of get back to work, get
Mm,
back to it, produce, produce, produce.
mm,
Our society's obsession with how productive we are because we're only valuable for producing money for someone.
mm,
Um, yeah, I think I tend to look at things more from like a structural societal level, like how uh, the systems that we have in place, how they affect people's grief and their ability
mm,
to grieve.
mm. Out of curiosity, because you saw pieces of us, I hope you enjoyed it.
Yes.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
There was stuff I wanted to mention, but I was like, it doesn't. Just the thing about Steve Buscemi. I'll talk about that later.
oh, we'll talk Steve Buscemi. That'll be great. I'm speaking to that, what you were saying, looking at structural things. Do you feel like there was a character in the show that speaks to you in that way? Was there any that tickled your brain in terms of like, yes, we're so grief phobic, and like, the thing that like what you were just saying about how get back to work. I love the tech entrepreneur because like the question she's answering in the interview
Oh,
is like, oh, does that have value? And she
yes,
kind of is like, she's so detached from her own emotions that to
yes,
me, capitalism feels like we're trying to tell ourselves that we can escape death. That feels like
yeah.
that. Anyway, so I'm curious, what was there a character that really tickled your brain about like, yes, the structural things of
Yeah, I think the tech one, I really love that because just this idea of like, yeah, I know I kind of started off with these ambitions, but you know what? Like, this is how life is, and you just have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and which is always funny because the whole point of the original saying was that it's impossible to do so.
yeah.
And yeah, just like, hey, I had it this way, so other people should be able to, like when I hear, especially in the US, about student loan forgiveness, well, I pay back my loan. So I, instead of realizing how much how much good it could do for the collective,
Mm,
you know, and okay, yes, I'll never understand the thinking of I went through this crappy thing, therefore you should go through it, instead of I went through this crappy thing and I'd like to save you from going through that.
mhm. Yeah.
which again, like, how is that? That shouldn't be a revolutionary thought.
I know. And it's like, and when people are almost like, well, that's not fair. Like
Yeah.
I've had this hardship and it's like,
Mm.
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me, the coal miner really resonated. I think just because of my interest, um, I've read the book Dope Sick, and then I watched the TV show about it. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Oh, excellent. Because as soon as you started that character, my brain was
You're
like,
like, I know where this is
oh,
going.
yep. I was like, oh, Purdue Pharma and the
Mhm.
coal mine. Yeah, and this whole, if you read the book Dope Sick, it does an excellent job of showing all, like, explaining all the different elements that made the opioid crisis into this perfect storm.
Mm,
So the miners, the backbreaking work,
mm,
also the medical field and how things were, you know, something about like patients being able to rate their satisfaction, and oh,
mm.
if they're unhappy and in pain, they're going to rate you more poorly, and
Oh God.
um and again, the greed of the Sackler family
Mhm.
to just say, oh, well, no, these people are just using it wrong. And no, we're not going to worry about that. And let's, like, we can make so much money, just push this version and that version and higher dosages. And so, yeah, I think to me, like, the coal miner character definitely just got me thinking again about all these different things that come together and create a perfect storm and turn into a crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and to what we were speaking about earlier, the idea that like, yeah, people aren't investing in getting these people physical therapy because that's a process and takes time and costs money and is man hours,
Yeah.
as opposed to just like bereavement leave, take a pill, go back to work.
Yeah.
And it's
And
like,
it's so, I mean, I do want to say, because I have no trouble admitting, like, I take antidepressants.
me too.
Um, and that's part of my life that'll probably always be part of my life. But I do therapy, I do yoga, I meditate, I do all these other things. It's people who, I think, when we just try to throw medication at a problem, that's not
Yeah.
helpful. And same thing, like if it's physical, um, I know from my own experience, physical therapy can do so much more than a painkiller.
Yeah.
And but again, yeah, the time, the money, the
Mm.
investment. Oh God, no, let's not do that. Let's just give
Yeah.
them a prescription.
Yeah. Exactly. And it just, it feels very, again, about just like, yeah, just go back to work. Here's a pill so you can go back to work immediately. And it's just like,
Mhm.
yeah, for me, I'm like, yeah, okay, this may as well happen. Sure.
Yeah.
Like
And I
even,
think to me, like what I think about, especially with capitalism, and especially the way things have changed over the years, because it wasn't always this bad. Like I know that
yeah.
particularly in the States with Reagan,
Mm-hmm.
taking away all these protections, and like you see, oh, before Reagan, this is what the highest paid CEO would, like, they make like 20 times. Now they make like 100 times
200
more than the
times.
lowest paid worker or whatever. Um, and oh God, where was I going with that? Uh,
Capitalism,
but just
painkillers wasn't always as
I
bad.
I feel like there's so much focus on the short term.
Hmm.
So instead of a long-term view of, okay, if we help this person, if we get them, whether it's like behavioral therapy or physical therapy, if we invest now and take the time, then they'll be better off in the future. Instead, it's, well, we need that person to get back to work right now because we need our profits. So
Mm-hmm.
we're just going to shove them back
Mm.
and, be like, hey, come on, work.
Yeah.
And then what happens to the person? Do they burn out? Do they get sick?
More injury
Yeah,
exacerbation.
do they become depressed because they haven't had any time to process their grief?
Mm.
And so there's such a, oh, apologies for the sirens
That's okay.
downtown Toronto.
I can't hear
Um,
it, so you're good.
oh, good. Okay. Whenever I'm on the phone with my mom, she's like, oh, there they are again. Um, but yeah, there's such a, like, even if you look at a profit-based system, it's always, we need to get our profits up for next quarter,
Right.
not how about we invest now and then we will slowly see the profits come around in a
Mhm.
year.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's in a way that's more sustainable for everyone. And that's why I think
Yes.
things like education are so undervalued, because
Oh
it's
yeah.
20 years before you're going to see a payoff of a
Yeah.
person teaching a 6-year-old, or a
Hmm.
5-year-old how to read. It's 20
Yeah.
years before you get to monetize that somehow. So it's
Yeah.
like,
And which again, it's always going back to the money and like, okay, you have a 6-year-old in 20 years, how productive are they going to be? Not how are they going to be as a person?
yeah.
Are they going to care about their community and their family and their friends?
Mm.
It's just, what are they going to be doing to make the rich richer?
Yeah. Well, and also just like, I mean, gosh, kids, I feel so bad for kids today, because I feel like kids are like struggling to get into colleges unless they've like written a book by the time they're 18. And I'm like, what? I'm like,
It's
you're a kid.
yeah, I mean, the American application process for uh university sounds a lot more complicated. Like in Canada,
Mm.
it was like, if I'm remembering, because we're going back, uh like filling out a couple applications. I don't know if I ever had to write an essay.
Oh,
Like
wow.
I hear in the States about, oh, I have to have a good essay to get in, and I'm like,
Like an
I'm pretty sure I
essay.
just applied and they looked at my grades and it was yes or no. And again, like, you guys pay so much more for education than we do in Canada, and even in Canada, it's become really untenable for the average person.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, when I'm hearing like, oh yeah, my college is like, I don't know, like say 40 grand a year, and I'm like,
A
that's more than my
year?
entire undergrad.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's even more
I
now,
think
I
my
think. I think it's closer to 50 now, probably. I don't know.
and I think my entire undergrad, now granted I graduated a while ago, but I think it would have been like 26,000 max
Wow.
for all
For 4
4 years.
years. That's great. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
So, and we had, I was in the students union, like people marching in the streets saying like lower fees, lower fees. We have to either freeze them or lower them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can't even, tuition fees in the States, I can't fathom.
Yeah, they blow my mind. I
Yeah.
um I yeah, as an undergrad I found myself, because that first semester, like I say, just all that stuff coming up again with my dad, like I started working a
Mhm.
lot and I was determined not to graduate with a lot of student loans. I was like mentally prepared that I would have to drop out. Like I went to a 2-year college and then transferred. And after one semester, I transferred a bunch of credits back to that 2-year college to get a 2-year degree, just in case if I needed to drop out, I could go get a job as a secretary somewhere or something.
Right.
And I was just like, I really worked very hard. And I got my master's here in the UK, and that was
Mm.
cheaper per year, even paying international fees. It is cheaper. And the international fees are
Wow.
like double, if not more, per year
Hmm.
to study internationally than it is in,
Yeah.
like more than double than what a local person would pay, that is. And it's still
Yeah.
cheaper. You're like,
It's a big issue here in Canada with we keep getting foreign students because the universities and colleges love that because they pay triple.
mm-hmm,
Um, but then they are bringing students over with no housing plan.
right.
Like, you can't accept a bunch of international students and not have a place to put them. So it's kind of a crisis.
Oh, wow,
Um,
really?
yeah, unfortunately.
Gosh.
You hear stories of like 4 girls sharing a one-bedroom apartment and stuff like that.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, let's add that crisis
So, which,
to the
but again,
pile.
it's the university saying, "Oh, well, forget the local students. Like we get one from India. We can have them paying triple the fees."
Hmm. Great.
Yeah,
Fabulous.
forget about the actual value of the education and what they're learning. It's just we got their money.
Yeah. Yeah. It drives me
Yeah.
crazy. Let's see. Was there, oh, I'm gonna ask another question. Oh, this is gonna be also about the show. Forgive me. Was there a character that you felt looked at loss in a way that you hadn't thought of before? Is part one of that question.
Yeah.
Or was there a particular character that you think people would most benefit from or relate, like that you think, yeah, in your,
Hmm. For some reason, I'm thinking, I don't know if it's because of everything that's been going on, but I keep thinking about the story about the bubby
oh yeah. Mhm.
escaping. And maybe I think a lot of us with grandparents or even parents who've gone through trauma, it's a lot of, we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
And don't ask me about it. And I'm not going to bring it up, and you better not bring it up. And
Mm,
if you start looking to me for emotional support, I'm going to be very kind of standoffish and tense and like, what's this all about? Like, I thought that was interesting because I've heard stories like that. I mean, I didn't really experience that in my life.
mm,
Um, but I've absolutely heard stories of, my grandparent went through this thing and they kind of had to become like a steel person.
yeah.
Yeah, like cannot show any vulnerability or
Mm.
softness because then that puts them at risk.
Yeah, and like that's based on someone in my life, and like so
Mm.
even that hugging story, like, oh, can I have a hug? The person didn't get angry, but they were just like, why? Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
because touch is a love language for me. Can I just have a
Yes, I
hug?
know.
They're like, it's an odd
I know
request.
sometimes I've been in situations where sometimes like, I was crying and they were like, "What do you want?" I'm like, "Can you hug me, please?" Like, do
Yeah,
I
they're like,
actually have to ask to be hugged?
yeah.
Like, can you just, it's so natural for me. And it's so like, oh, I tend to be like
Mm,
kind of the mom friend. Um,
mm.
so I think I'm very nurturing. I give good hugs.
Mm.
And
Love a
so
good
yeah,
hug.
having to ask for that to me is just like,
Yeah.
oh my God, it's so basic.
Well, and I think it speaks to that, like that generational trauma that so many people have gone
Mhm.
through for different reasons, whether it's a Jewish person or a coal miner or an African American person or a Native American person or, there anybody like,
Yeah.
and for various reasons, and or like a domestic abuse survivor or something that's more invisible that you can't see, that
Mhm.
passes down in one way or another. And so how people do or don't deal with their grief around that, around not feeling safe or feeling betrayed by someone they trusted, and like that in itself is its own kind of grief, I think. And I think so
Mhm.
for me that was I really wanted that one there, just to look at exactly what you said, that generational trauma and how in a way it makes it hard even to grieve as a family,
Yes.
which I'm interested to know in terms of your work. Have you encountered that with clients? Like, obviously, I know you probably, protect your clients and the privacy, but like, do you, generally speaking, do you feel like everybody in a family is on the same page? Or is everybody like really dealing with it in their own way?
I think for this, I'd like to use like an example of my own family.
Great.
Just because as soon as you said that, I was like, yeah,
You're
they're
like, I got it.
yeah. Just so my dad died of stage 4 prostate cancer. So if there's anyone with a prostate watching this, please, 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 if you're over the age of 40, get your prostate specific antigen tested. It's just a blood test, no scary stuff. Um, and so before he died, because I first off, I thought that if you tell someone you have stage 4 cancer, that people know that like stage 4 is the last stage, things aren't looking too good. I was very wrong. There was a lot of, he's gonna be okay. We just have to believe. Um, like we're just gonna pray and hope that blessings come down. And of course the thing is he could appear quite good at times.
Mm,
But his treatments were working, they were working really well.
mm,
It was it but not acknowledging that like eventually these treatments aren't going to work. They're going to stop working.
Mm.
So yeah, I think in my family, I think we all grieve pretty openly, but I think it was interesting. Like I'm thinking of one of my cousins who just walked, he was so silent and he just looked stunned. And then I think of, myself breaking down in tears and or seeing my mother cry. My mom almost never cries. I don't know if that's because she's an Aquarius or what. Uh, but it's very, before my dad died, I would have said like I could count on two hands how many times I've seen my mom cry in my life. And so to see her suddenly crying openly in front of other people, because of course she couldn't hold it in,
Mm.
was quite interesting. So I think, sorry, I'm getting off track, but I think for
No.
me, like I remember speaking to a cousin and I said, he has stage 4 cancer. Do you know what that means? And she said, yes. And I said, then why does everyone keep telling me he's going to be okay? I feel like I'm losing my mind. And she
Mm.
said, that's just us. That's our people. That's what we do. And I was like, okay, except me,
Mm.
because so I think in terms of like how people grieve and process their grief, I think in my family, there was a lot of denial
Mm.
before he died of what was coming. And it was still, miracles can happen and you never know, he could make it through. Whereas I was looking like even a year before he died, I was like,
Mm-mm.
he's not going to make it. Like I just had, before he was uh introduced to the palliative pain doctor, like a month or two before that, I was like, I need to start preparing myself. So yeah, it was quite different because I had family members say, no, he's going to be fine. And meanwhile, I'm secretly like calling the funeral homes, getting comparisons,
No.
trying to do this work so that I don't have to deal with it because that's my thing.
When
It's
you're
like,
grieving.
I refuse to plan a funeral when I'm grieving. I'm not going to put myself through that.
Mm.
Um, and I knew from my grandparents on my mom's side who had their funerals pre-planned that even with the pre-planning, you still have to go to the funeral home and make a bunch of other decisions. So even with the planning and the pain, there's still a lot to do
Mm.
post-mortem.
Mm.
But yeah, I guess more in terms of the anticipatory grief that like I was feeling that.
Mm.
Um, and really dealing with that the whole time while a lot of my family was in denial and just like, no, he's going to be fine.
Mm.
And then I think of my brother, who I don't know if you watch Succession.
No, I've not seen it. I've heard it's good.
Okay,
I
okay.
need
I
to
don't.
watch it. That's
I'm just gonna
okay.
say there was a character on there who was like, "I'm fine. I pre-grieved," and my
Like, good
brother
for
didn't say
you.
those words exactly, but I remember him saying, "Well, I've already processed this," and I was like, "You can't process something that hasn't happened yet." I think what he meant was, "I have accepted what's going to happen, and I know that it's coming."
Mm.
Which if he would talk to me more, he would know that that's anticipatory grief.
Mm.
But he genuinely thought like, no, I've dealt with this. I'm
Yeah,
ready.
I'm good.
I can handle it when the time comes. And then of course the time comes and
Yeah,
we're all a mess.
yeah. Oh,
So
Matt,
yeah, I think
Matt. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I think it really, like the thing is our systems that we have in place, like our capitalist systems, the government,
Mm.
society definitely impacts how we grieve, but I think it can still be very individual.
For sure, absolutely. That I have a personal question, and you're more than welcome to tell me to fuck off. So please, please do. But just that story is so relatable. I feel like I know exactly what you're saying. And I'm curious for you, being the only member of your family who is like, no, no, this is no, there's no way out. I have two parts to a question. Was your dad one of the people in denial, if I may ask? And based on that, because you were not in denial about it, did you feel like you were able to have um real conversations with him and to actually really acknowledge that with him and to be like, I'm really enjoying this time with you. and like, I know we don't have,
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
was there any dynamic with him in particular, that shaped the time you had with him, being the person in the family who was like knowing that this was gonna happen? And was it based on how he reacted as well? Like, was he in denial like the rest of the family? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, first off, I know that prostate cancer is extremely common
Hmm.
amongst men of us. Like he was like 70 when he died. So, um, but men of a certain age, like it's just like if you reach this age, you're probably gonna get it. And of
Oh,
course,
wow.
unfortunately, with my dad, by the time he was diagnosed, it wasn't just a simple, oh, we can take out the prostate, you'll be fine. Because that actually happened with both of my grandfathers.
Hmm.
They both had prostate cancer, but
And they just
had
removed
it
the
removed,
prostate.
totally fine. Lived like another 20 years after that.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas with my dad, by the time he was diagnosed, it had already metastasized to his bones. But, and I don't know if this was just an issue of him kind of not understanding medical things,
Mm.
or I don't know if I feel like my dad often had this concept of like, I'll be fine. Didn't matter what it
Really?
was, he was just like, I'm gonna be fine. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know about you guys, but
Mm.
whatever, I'm fine.
Mm.
And because maybe because he was such a physically strong person, he was the kind who like never got
Mm.
like, I think I saw him have a cold maybe 2 or 3 times in my life.
Mm.
He could run, he could get 5 hours of sleep, have one cup of cha in the morning, go all day,
Mm.
and just be like, what do you mean you're tired? You know? So I think because maybe because of that, he was just like, oh, this is fine. But I
Mm.
also I have agreements with the doctors
Mm.
because I don't think I know that one of the first doctors he spoke to said, well, this isn't a death sentence, which to me is like, what the fuck?
Mm.
Like, why would you? And I think I always thought in my brain, like, is that because with the doctor, are they thinking, okay, you're not going to die in 6 months or even a year?
Mm.
He had about 3.5 years between diagnosis and death.
Mm.
Um, so is that what the doctor was thinking? Was it that, like, I know my mom and I are big thing, and my mom worked in a medical library for 20 years, so
Mm.
a bit more
Yeah.
experience there. We were, we're Googling and Googling, and okay, the 5 year survival rate is 30%, which isn't a great number.
Yeah, it's not
And
great.
we were like, but he's been so strong. He could be part of that 30%. Who knows?
Mm.
Um, and I think so doctors saying things like this isn't a death sentence. We have lots of tools in our toolbox. I My understanding is that I think my dad genuinely believed like, oh, I can just keep getting chemo and
Forever.
radiation forever and I'll be fine.
Mm.
And not realizing that like, oh, the chemo could stop working or the radiation could stop working or the
Mm.
hormone injections could stop. Because he started off with hormone injections and it was like they did that until it stopped working. Then chemo and they did that until it stopped working. So it was, I think
Mm.
when a doctor says we have lots of tools in our toolbox, will be specific. How many? What are
Mm.
you talking about? Are there different kinds of chemo? Are there different kinds of hormone injections? How many different things can you try
Mm.
until you have to accept and that they've stopped working? And then when he was referred to the palliative pain doctor, that would have been like June of 2021. That doctor had to say, do you understand, like, I think he asked, have you been given a prognosis or do you know why you're here? And my dad was like, no. So
Wow.
again, I don't know if that was, I mean, my dad spoke English, but I don't know if he really understood what palliative meant.
Meant, yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think there was a lot of denial in him. And again, I think a big part of that is cultural. Because I remember when my maternal grandmother was dying, and we were, at her bedside, and like 2 or 3 days before she died, my dad's like, but miracles can happen. And it's like, she's 97. What miracle? Like, she's
What more do you
97 and her
need?
body's worn out. She's done. Like, and again, for what quality of life?
Yeah. And for
you know,
her, I
but
feel like at some point as you get older too, you're like, all my friends are dead. There's nothing for me to
yeah,
do. I can't see. I'm
yeah, you
ready to
know, she
go.
literally couldn't see. She was almost fully blind at that point.
Mm,
My grandparents literally were the last in their group of friends. They watched all of their friends die.
yeah,
By the
that
time their
sounds
funerals came
horrible.
around, there were no friends to show. Like
Yeah,
it
no
was
peers.
basically my parents' friends coming.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, I think a lot of it, I definitely think I can't say for broader Indian culture, but my experience in Punjabi culture has been one of like deep death denial and like
mm,
we're not gonna say it's over till it's over.
yeah.
And but unfortunately I've seen that result in like a lack of planning and
Mm.
I think people struggling even more so in their grief because they are so shocked that it actually happened.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like people, oh, I never thought that would happen to me. And it's like it's going to happen to
Yeah,
all of us.
that's the
Um,
thing. Yeah, like
yeah.
I dread the day that my mom dies. I know it's gonna happen someday.
Yeah, me
I'm not
too.
looking forward to it. I'm
I'm
not gonna.
dreading it. I'm gonna be so sad.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
ready. Never.
yeah,
I
yeah. And you can, and I think that's fine. You can talk about that and say like, I don't know how to handle that. But
mm,
I think to say, well, it's just not gonna happen.
yeah. And I think
You're setting
also
yourself up for like
a
a much worse
big
experience.
disappointment. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's also I think I had a childhood friend, his dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and he had had a brain hemorrhage. And I was visiting a few years ago, pre-COVID. And something I'm really mad at myself about with this is that this person was very dear to me. My childhood friend's dad, like he was just a very special person. Like I was very shy as a
Yeah.
kid, and he just was like one of those people. He was one of my people. And he built stages for children's theater, and my mom ran a daycare out of my
Oh,
house. So like
yeah.
he built a mini submarine out of cardboard and brought it to our
Oh.
house, and like go-karts, and he would build, and he was a beautiful illustrator. I even have, I perhaps somewhat rudely was like, I want something of his. He's a
Oh,
beautiful
wow.
illustrator. And
Yeah.
so I just got it framed. And something that really made
Beautiful.
me mad at myself. Yeah, thank you. He's a great drawer. And so I was there for my drama school showcase, and I contacted the family and I was like, I'm gonna come up because I was in LA, and I was like, I'm coming up to Northern California, my hometown. I'm gonna just hang. And it was funny because my childhood friend's parents are like, do you want to like take the car and go out? And I'm like, no,
Mm.
I just want to be here. And it was just so nice to just have a few days with him. And something I'm really mad at myself about is they took me to the airport and it was time to go. And George, his name is George, he was just like, if I don't see you again, and I'm like, George, you will, I'm gonna see you again. And I wish I had said, it's been an honor. I love you. And like we said, we were like, I love you. I love you. I love you. And then COVID happened, and then I didn't see him again. And I'm so mad at myself that I didn't just give him the grace, because he was trying to confront his own mortality and I wouldn't let him. And so to this
Yeah.
day, I'm just like, I'm so mad at myself because like, and I've had other friends. Like I've been very lucky that I've had older friends in my life. An old teacher of mine, she died possibly in 2019, I want to say, because I got back from the US on that trip and I had an email from her, and she lived in South Africa, where my partner's from, where I lived for 5 years. And she emailed me and she said, Jessica, I've got lung cancer. I'm not seeking treatment. When are you coming? And I was like, I'm coming. Like, I have a ticket already. Like, I'm going to come see family. Just hold on, Yvonne. I'm coming. And she's
Yeah.
like, I want you to come say goodbye to me. I was like, okay. And
Yeah.
so, and I would call her, but she had lung cancer. So she kept coming down the stairs and I could hear her so out of breath. So I stopped calling and I just started emailing her letters to make sure, because also South African postal system
Uh,
is crazy. And I
yeah.
just kept emailing, just like, Yvonne, I'm thinking of you. I love you. I'm coming if you can hold on for me, but if not,
Mhm.
I love you, you know. And I even had a mentor because I got a Rotary scholarship to go to South Africa. And the man who made that possible for me also died a few years after I got to South Africa. And I remember my mom messaged me being like, oh, Ted is on his way out. And I called him and we just chatted for a few minutes. And it was
Mhm.
just like, Ted, I'm really sorry to hear about your diagnosis, but I just want you to know you have literally changed my life. And I love you. And I'm
Mhm.
so grateful that I know you. And I miss you. And I'm going to miss you. And he was like, I love you too. And I never spoke to him again. He passed away. And just with George, though, because he was mine and someone I didn't want to let go of. And I'm so mad at myself that I
Yeah.
didn't give him that gift of letting him let go, So it's like something that really
Yeah.
bothers me that I think about, because I think that not only are the people that are grieving are going to deal with something in a way, being left behind is harder, but if you're the one that's in the process of dying, that's also quite scary. That's a solo journey.
Yeah.
That's a
And you kind
solo
of, and
journey.
you want, I mean, I think that if I knew I was terminally ill, I would want people around me to,
Acknowledge it.
just, okay, like whatever, whatever I can do to comfort you. And
Mm,
I'm thinking back to the other part of your question. Um, so when my dad was informed that the chemo had stopped working,
mm,
I think that was when he finally started to accept it and like um didn't talk about it too much. But again, I was like, I need to plan, I need to plan.
mm,
And so it was December and I started like went home for Christmas. And I started to write his obituary and
mm,
or not the eulogy, sorry.
mm.
But I did write the obituary too, which again, I'm always like, let me just have
Like,
this ready
oh,
to go. And that way I don't have to think about it when the time comes.
mm,
Which is why I'm always advocating for planning ahead.
mm,
And so that was one of the few times where I was able to finally sit down and saying, hey, what do you want? Like,
mm,
what we in Sikhism we call them shabads,
mm,
like hymns, like what shabads do you want? And is there anything that's really important to you? Or when I was writing the eulogy, like, sir, like just asking him questions like, hey, do you remember this? Do you remember that? And again, like he told me one story that I'd never heard before, ever. And so it was, again, like just so special. And I think kind of once he got to that place of, I don't know if I call it acceptance, but kind of acknowledging that, like, okay, this is like I'm nearing the end of my life.
mm.
Um, I don't know if I'd say it made our bond stronger, but I think just there was that connection of like,
Yeah,
okay, I know that this is coming and I want to make sure that like we say all the important things to each other
yeah,
and spend time together, which again was hard because again, when someone's dying of cancer, they're mostly sleeping.
yeah.
And you have to let them sleep. What am I going to do? Wake
They're
them up, say, hey,
tired.
dad, spend time with me.
Mm.
It's just like,
Yeah,
okay, let them
exactly.
rest, let them rest.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And so my childhood friend's dad, George, we just watched a lot of Poldark. It was great. I just
Yeah,
stayed in my pajamas for 3 days and we just hung out. And I
yeah,
had the best time. And I would not trade that for anything. And I was
yeah.
genuinely planning on coming back sooner rather than later, but COVID hit and
Hmm.
he made it through a good chunk of COVID. Like if it had it not been for COVID, I would have seen him again. But I wish I had just, because then you can just sit in that and be like, yeah, this was fun.
Yeah,
I'll see
yeah,
you. I'll see you later, Um,
yeah,
I'm aware that we're almost out of time on
yeah.
this call, and I don't know if you need to zip off soon because we had a bunch more
I'm
questions, but I'm
good.
honestly, yeah.
Yeah, I would love to answer more questions because I thought, oh,
Okay,
the
great.
time goes by so quickly.
Yeah, it does. Okay, cool.